Well, thank you very much for coming, everybody. It's lovely to see so many who wanted to know about what we were up to in those days. We often look back at our history with rose-tinted glasses. Were those days as good as we think they were? What do you think, Andrea?
No.
I knew that was coming. Anyway, Andrea and I are going to talk through things that we recognise readily. We both got very good memories of the time, and how we saw it as children, teenagers. So here we go. First of all, when it comes to work, why won't that work, Cassie?
Try the arrow.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Just testing. First of all, this was our old school next to the church. You'll know that the school obviously is not down now, it's used as a car park, but it was the school since 1860-ish. And Andrew and I spent some very happy days there. And if I'd like to show you who the schoolmaster was, and also the vicar at the time. There's Reverend Gilding and Mr. Wood. Reverend Gilding, he was the vicar, and he was in what was then the vicarage at Courthouse. He was the last vicar who would be at the vicarage known as the courthouse known as the vicarage. Mr. Wood was our headmaster, and he's a very good cricketer. You can see he had the whites and the pads. He was very good, and Andrew would like to say a few words here.
Yeah, the school was divided by the great big curtain all across into two classrooms. And Mrs. Wood had the back one, and Mr. Wood at the front. Yeah, it was a very happy school, actually.
Yes,
I was really happy there until 11 plus. And then we had to take the 11 plus, and in those days, if you passed for grammar school, you stayed away from Monday to Friday, which is awful. And I was put with an old couple, well, they were old to me then, in Marlborough, down an alleyway off the High Street, and I've never been so lonely and miserable as I was then, because you've left everything at home, the family that you've been with all that time, my dog, my horse, my pony, and I hated it. And that started me hating school at Marlborough Grammar School. And I couldn't bear it, and I hated the school all the way through. Okay.
I had the opposite thoughts. I loved the grammar school, but then I didn't have to board. I was a little bit younger than Andrea, so by the time it came to me, we went in daily. And because I was good at sport, I was no good academically, but I was always good at sport. I got through quite well. But I won't say about the 11 plus. The system that we only had 3 or 4 people each year who actually passed 11 plus. And I must remind you, I was at the peak of my academic career at this stage. Downhill after that, that's why I'm here. And I always remember that, do you know Lionel Barnes coaches? He passed at the same time as me, and this is the futility of the 11 plus. We had to go for an interview with the governors of the grammar school. So we both went, and they asked us, well, Sonny, what would you like to do when you leave school? And I said, oh, I want to be a farmer. That's the sort of thing you had to say. And they said, you're in. Lionel said, I want to be a coach driver, a bus driver. And they said, well, you don't need to go to grammar school if you want to be a bus driver. Of course, he became in charge of a multi-million-pound coach company, and I'm still here. So, anyway,
Can I just say,
yes.
Really, if the grammar school it's still there. When you go to Morby, you come down the green, you can see it. But instead of staying outside in the town, after a year, I was able to get into the house that everybody else stayed with that couldn't get home. And as you come down from the green, just before the roundabout, there's a big gateway on the left, and set back is a big house, and that's Y House, and that's where all the pupils that couldn't get home during the week had to stay. So after the first year, I got back into there, and of course, rules and regulations the whole time. I hated it there. So really, I hated every year at the grammar school. I absolutely hated. I wanted to go home. So
However, in a way,
I did pass 4 O levels.
Oh, yes, you did, didn't you?
Yeah.
It turned out quite well for Andrea later on, which we will see
Yeah.
shortly. Just a little bit more about primary school. The house on the left was the Aldridges, and Billy Aldridge, who was the blacksmith and shot the Derby winner, he was passed on by them. But Nancy, his daughter, lived there, and I well remember 3 of us. There's in the middle of the school, you'll see there's a bell near the top of the apex, and Nancy caught 3 of us firing catapults at it one day, and she was, I can tell you, she was quite the tartar, but we didn't do that again. Right.
Did we not have a right of way footpath?
To the left, yeah, there was a footpath and it led to some houses actually. There was people lived along there.
Did it go down to the Brown farm?
Yeah, and it went to Brown's farm and also Hale's farm. Yeah. More about that in a minute. Anyway, there's our cricket team from the time. That's where I took the photograph of Reverend Gilding and Mr. Wood. I put this in because they were very highly respected members of our community. They did things in the village as well. The vicar, he was on parish council, as was the headmaster. And you'll see some very familiar family names here. Joe Wilkins on the right-hand side had the stores. Bendel family to his right, and there's a chap who lived in West Street. Charlie Underwood, Gilding, Cyril Palmer had a farm at Baden, Braxton, Bert Westwood, the landlord of the Bell. Johnny Fisher, if you remember Johnny Fisher, Mr. Wood, Reg Slade, my father, Tony Gilligan, Dick Holland, who was a landlord of the Crown, quite a sort of half famous jockey in his day, and Percy Muckleston. Pauline Mills, if you know Pauline in the family, that's her father. Now, let me tell you where that picture was taken. First of all, we played cricket, or they played cricket and football in the West Street meadow, just along from the carnival field, not the carnival field itself, Woodley Meadow, next on. And there's some trees in the middle, and if you hit the trees, when you 6 and out, yeah. But that's where that photograph, you can see the beech trees at the back. And when they actually went to Farm Lane in 55, you can see there's very few photographs taken of the cricket club playing in Farm Lane, but they did indeed play there. And you can't see it from here, but there's quite a patchwork quilt of tiles broken on those houses.
How long, when did they build those houses then?
54, 55, after when the camp was taken down.
Yeah.
There's a football team. It's basically the same sort of players. Johnny Fisher, my father. Peter Ludlow, front, second from the right in the front. You remember Pete Ludlow? Yeah. He was a Ramsbury boy actually, but he was great friends with my father, and so he played for Auburn. Waxy Morgan, goalkeeper, 6'8".
I'll tell you something.
Waxy, yeah, go on, Pete wants to say something.
Waxy Morgan was a mad chap on a motorbike.
Yes, he was.
And when they were putting the sewerage through the village, Waxy tried to jump one of the trenches and ended up having his leg amputated.
Yes, yeah. That was after that. That's only 2 or 3 years after that.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the milkman, we had 2 milk deliveries, Charlie Hale, Baden Hill Farm, and Bert Hale and West Street. If you read on, at school playtime, children were kept in if Bert Hale was rounding up his cows because his language was so ripe. and if you know his grandson, Adrian Hale, you'll still keep away from him. Adrian, I will tell you, there was a big fire along Lottage Road on Friday night, Thursday night, and it was huge flames and smoke going up. And our next door neighbour, Madeline and Martin knew about, they called the fire brigade, and who came, but we didn't hear any more. The next day, we thought we'd see what it was, and Beryl went out for a walk. There's nothing there. And what it was, he had an old caravan, at this stage, and he'd had it filled with rubbish and put a match to it. Milk was delivered in glass bottles, and this is quite a revelation at the time. It was usually before then, it was in churns and pulled up with a milk measure, and you had to take your own thing to have it put into.
Because we had our own milk, because I was born on a farm.
Yeah, and we were born on a farm. We're going to come to that in a minute.
Be quiet.
Don't get ahead of yourself. Yeah, the type of milk, the cows that they kept were Jerseys. They're the richest milk you could have. And that's all we had. That's all we knew was Jersey milk. Guernsey, Jersey. Yeah, you know, Richard. Yeah, thank you. Deliveries were made daily, every single day of the week, Christmas Day as well. Milk was perishable, of course, and there's no fridges much in those days. And it was,
Your mum used to deliver.
yeah, my mother used to deliver, yeah. Customers would typically leave the payment in a box or on the porch. People did that, didn't they? They'd leave the money out for the milkman to take.
Yeah.
And no problems. They always collected on Saturday. And the ones who didn't pay didn't get milk the next week.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you remember them? I remember them. Some dairies also deliver chocolate milk, eggs particularly. The pints and quarts of milk were delivered in clear glass bottles, and it showcased the improved hygiene and quality standards in milk products. That was certainly true of Charlie L. I wasn't sure about Bert now.
No, I don't.
And free school milk came in as well in third bottles, third of a pint bottles. You remember that, don't you?
And in the junior school, yeah, we
in
had
junior
those,
school, yeah, in the
yeah,
other school.
yeah.
Okay. You walk into this, won't you? Farming daily milk collection. This is a jigsaw. The one on the right is a jigsaw. Actually, I thought it was quite nice to put it as a jigsaw, but it shows the lorries collecting churns. All the farms who had cows would put their milk into churns, and they were collected daily and taken to Wootton Bassett, I expect, Bridget, or somewhere.
Yes,
wherever you like.
we had that,
Yeah, yeah.
because we had
You're still on that.
we had a herd of cows.
Yeah, you did.
And lots of chickens.
Come to that in a minute. The Ferguson was the workhorse of its day. Most of the small farmers had a Ferguson tractor, and yeah, and you'll see how many farmers we had in the village. We had loads of little farms, and I don't think that I think I've forgotten some of them, but there was 20 small farms in the village. And how many have we got today? 4, 4 or 5? I don't know. Yeah. Now then, over to you.
But Grandpa had, he owned one field, which is the Garlings now. The rest was rented, and it went right up to the top of the downs, right over to almost to the Wentworth farm. And
Ewan's Hill.
yeah, and I loved having the farm, and I had a pony which was handed down to me, and somebody taught me to ride, and I loved that pony.
You can see that.
And the donkey that belonged to Dr. Mills, if anybody remembers Dr. Mills in Ramsbury. How he became to have a donkey, nobody knows, but his surgery was halfway down the high street in Ramsbury in his house. This donkey lived somewhere off the high street, and he got loads and loads of people moaning because of the noise the donkey made. And he was great friends of my granddad, and he said, "Oh, Oliver," he said, "would you please have that donkey on your farm?" It's real naughty donkey that was. But Grandpa had the donkey, and I don't know what happened to it in the end.
You used to let the cows out.
I used to let the cows out and things like that.
Oh,
And he wouldn't let me catch my pony. He'd come in between me and the pony. I don't know where it ended up, but if you want to, it wouldn't move. You could push it and pull it, and it was just stand. That was if it's that kind of move. But I don't know what happened to it in the end. I think it
perhaps she's still there.
was. But how Dr. Mills came to have a donkey, I don't know.
We had a crop spraying manufacturer in the village in West Street, behind the old Masons Arms, called Evers and Wall. They some might remember. They were there until certainly in the end of the 60s when they moved up to the Woodlands, and they were there for about another 20 years. But Fred McCrill, who was one of their foremen, they employed probably 20 people in Albourne. Fred McCrill was one of their foremen, and every Monday he would take their tractor, their Ferguson tractor, load up spray, crop spray on the back with all the materials and everything, drive up to London, stay up there all week, and he would spray all the parks in London, not all of them, of course, but a good many. What a contract that was in the 50s for them. But I know that Mr. Evers was a London man. He lodged with my grandmother, and he's ever such a nice man. We had a doctor and a dentist in Albourne, and they were at Neil's down South Street, you know, and that's the dentist plate. That's the actual dentist who was here, Mr. Lee. And can you remember him?
No.
I can. You know, I'm surprised you didn't hear me screaming.
I know when Dr. Mills finished, we went to there for the doctor.
Yeah, we went to the doctors. Yeah, that's right. Andrea's first job. This is what I can say. When she was at grammar school, she hated grammar school, but it did sort of lead her into this.
The only thing I was really good at school was art, and I did enjoy music. And I had a job fixed before I left school. I can't quite remember how we did it, but it was up Marlborough, up the Savernake Road, part way up. There's a bridge with a railway line underneath, but there was just to the right down there, on a little track, was a business which did hand-painted tiles. Well, you had to train for quite a while to be able to do it properly, but we painted, but eventually I was able to do jobs, and I suppose there was quite a few of us painting full stop all day, and we painted anything. They were made into trays, fireplace, they had the size of tiled fireplaces, big panels. Even some went onto the Queen Mary, the ship, and we have now, well, we did have some in the Albert and Victoria Museum, and I think they're still there. We were the best in the country. We painted absolutely anything and everything, and it was a really lovely job. But to get there, to get to Marlborough, was very difficult. I had a lift with Pete Ludlow and Jack Stroud. They both worked in Marlborough, but if I had to walk all the way down to the town every evening and to hang about for them, because if they were working outside Marlborough, I had to hang about and wait. Anyway, I did that for a year, and I really did enjoy my job, and I was quite proud of what I did actually.
And Packard and Ord, who are the owners of Marlborough Tiles, they're very highly regarded nationally, and you don't see them come up on antique shows because they just don't come up, do they? But
No,
they would
I'm
be worth a lot of money now.
And we all had our own initial to put on the back, so we always knew if they came back up from the kiln room, there's something wrong with them. They knew whose it was, you know. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I would like to think there's some of mine in the,
Yeah, I'm sure they would.
in the
Yeah, yeah.
museum.
And so most people, as today, work outside of the village, of course, because there's just nothing much in the village. The main village business was, in fact, the egg packing station. And those who live in Valley View will know exactly. Thank you very much. Yes, we have some remnants. And they were probably, I'm sorry, I have got a photograph. I just couldn't find the photograph of it. But anyway, it was there where it was. They probably employed 30 or 40 people, I suppose, something like that. And they were the main employees. Barnes coaches. This is Andrea's family home in Southern Lane.
You wouldn't recognise it now, I'm afraid.
Number 2.
It's number 2, it's a farmhouse, and it was a lovely old house. And I was really, really happy there.
It's where you
We
go
used to have
up
a,
Farm Lane, turning left into Southern Lane, it's just there.
yeah.
Yeah.
And all that's similar still is the front bit there
Oh, front bit there, yeah.
with the 4 windows. The
Yeah.
rest of it's
There's
gone.
yeah.
that was a really happy house.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it.
This is a mid-50s television. We're all of that sort of age, aren't we? We can remember these. They were not well used in the village. There were a few, but I well remember Wilf Bendel, who's on the cricket photograph. He was the hair cutter. We wouldn't call it hairdresser, in fact, hair chopper, I think. And us boys particularly, but a lot of the men would go specially to him and have a haircut because they had this television and you could watch Noddy or something. Seriously, I kid you not. And the accumulators, who remembers accumulators?
Yes.
Thank you. They were used by a lot of people during the 30s, 40s, 50s who didn't have electric supply, couldn't afford probably to have an electric supply. They were just big batteries basically, but they were recharged every sort of week or so.
I didn't know those.
Oh, you were too rich to have one.
A rechargeable battery.
What is it?
Sorry?
A rechargeable battery. What is it? Accumulator.
Accumulator is just a rechargeable battery.
But you run your lights, what do you use it for electricity in your house?
No.
No, because you didn't have electricity. You could, yeah, they're about that big. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, about that big. And it's just it's a rechargeable battery that had to be taken to the Orborne District Cycle Store, which is on the corner of Castle Street and the Cumberland Road, and Tommy Gunn's along West Street. It would be taken weekly, and it didn't cost very much. It was a lot less than paying for full electric, which it came in eventually anyway. But it's just interesting that quite a few houses in the family, they had accumulators as their sole source of electric. And that's how they're the charge. That's the Orborne Cycle Company, Orborne District Cycle Store. Charlie Alsop was the owner in those days. And they had a chap who did all the shop work and that, called Harold Herring. Harold Herring. He lived at Foxhill. He cycled in every day from Foxhill. Who remembers Harold?
I do.
Yes.
Can I say
On the
something?
left.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to place it. What's the right house?
The White House on the left is
That's the
the
junction.
junction now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It was.
Can I just say there,
Let Pete say something.
there was 3 petrol pumps within 100 yards of
Yes.
each other there in the 50s. There was hardly any cars about in the village. There was petrol pumps, Shell petrol pumps at the Auburn Engineering.
Became Auburn.
Just this side of the White House was Tommy Lunn with Esso, and his pumps were where the entrance to West Street Motors is. And just round the corner from the White Pit was Mars Barracks, Cleveland. And that was 3 lots of petrol pumps with hardly any cars in the village.
Yeah. That's true. There was no diesel then, was there?
No,
No.
diesel.
2-star and 4-star.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There were pantomimes, not the Alec productions you get now, but there weren't very many pantomimes, but Andrea will remember them.
I've got those, I don't.
You don't. If you look very closely, you'll see me on the front right-hand side. Do I still look like him? I'm sorry. But there's a lot of people on here I remember. Now, the girl in the middle, she's Melanie Locke. Now, Melanie from Woods End, she was a singing, dancing project there. Everyone thought she was really, really going to make the grade. And she's always in the papers and that. She's still living in Bristol. She became a professional dancer and singer, but no one would have heard of her.
I can just about remember her.
You can remember Melanie, yeah. There's a few views I've got of the village now from the 50s. Recognisable, absolutely easily recognisable today. Across the green there was a pathway which is still there underneath the turf. Looking down Marlborough Road towards what's now the post office. The house on the left, you'll see is thatched still. the thatch was taken off by Basil Horn, who lived there in the late 60s, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bottom one is the what's now the post office.
Yeah.
And they're looking from the direction through from the Crown through to what's now the post office, the cycle Horn Cycle Company on the left. Now, people were saying about another petrol pump, and if you look on the right hand side, you can you see it? Oh, there was one there as well. But Vic Barrett, who owned the shop, and the next picture down is Barrett's. Vic and Marjorie Barrett owned the shop. Vic was a taxi driver.
He was my dad's brother.
He's what?
Vic.
He was what? Yeah, Andrew's brother, Andrew's uncle.
Oh, yeah.
Andrew's uncle. Yeah, there are lots of Barretts about. And you'll see the bottom picture is the old pond that was built in 1953 for the coronation of the Queen. It's not like that now, but it's only just been built then. And I do remember the butcher in the shop above the pond to the right. You remember the butchers? Was a chap called Gilbert. Gilbert. Remember Gilbert? And on the coronation day, we had games and fun on the carnival field and football field, not still then, Greek field. And Vic, they had lights all around the pond and lit the pond up because it had just been built and released. And he dived in and it broke half the lights. There's a few more. Looking towards Horbrook House from the bus stop. You can see that thatch there.
That was a bakery, wasn't
It was a bakery, yeah, bakery. There's another one, next one down, you can see Auburn Engineering, what became Auburn Engineering. Also, the Queen Victoria on the left-hand side of that middle picture is there. And also on the right-hand side, you can just make out the sign that says Mason's Arms.
it? It's so many pubs. It's so many pubs, didn't we?
Yeah, there were 5 in operation here. And the bottom picture was, you'll see what's now the hurdles. The end bit hasn't been built, had not been built then. So it's actually today an end that has been built on hurdles. The right-hand side, there's what's the library now.
Yeah.
That was, excuse me, Allborn Arts and Crafts. And
Mrs. She was
and we will tell you about the lady who was the proprietor of Allborn Arts and Crafts.
yeah, her name was Mrs. She, and
SHEA, yeah.
yeah, and she had a lovely shop there. I've still got some of the crockery now that I bought. It was different.
Yeah, it was arts and crafts, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was super. Yeah.
And also Mrs. Shea, she designed clothes for Pen and Puppets. So you've heard of Pen and Puppets.
And do you remember she lived? Do you know that house in the middle of Butts?
Yeah, if you go up Morpher Road
Yeah.
to Butts, turn left
There's
towards
a
the Butts.
Big house in the middle.
Big
and
house
you've
on the
got-
right hand side, yeah.
Well, she lived in half of that. The other side was
Is it
Gunny Bryn's
Mrs.
wife,
Bryn, yeah.
because Gunny Bryn was a thatcher and he lived opposite.
Yeah.
She couldn't live with him because he'd do a job, he was a good thatcher, but then he'd drink all the money away. So she lived in one house and he lived opposite.
They didn't speak for 50 years. But their sons, they had 3 sons. One was killed in the war, and one son, Ken Bryn, went to Canada, but he was in the last year of our war as a Lancaster telecommunications something, and he wrote a book about the last year of the war, which we actually have in the Heritage Centre. It was really interesting.
Mm.
And Tony Bryn, the youngest one, he became chief inspector in the local constabulary. Right. Blacksmiths, there we are.
they were
That
good.
is actually a modern photograph, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. All stores, well, you saw that photograph. That's actually before the war. We use this one when we do American tours. We did an American tour today, actually, and they spend as long as they can outside that shop, looking up at that windows where Dick Winters lodged.
Yeah.
There's the blue plaque. You've seen the blue plaque up there now, and which wasn't there then, of course. That's Mr. Barnes, who owned the shop, and his son there was the one, he was killed in 1943, he's in the RAF. And his daughter Stella, that's Stella Barnes, she married Bob Barnes of Barnes Coaches, who lived next door. Their daughter, Jean Fire, still lives in Kandahar now. So lots of stories. Bourbon Feast, third week in July.
That was something we always look forward to.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
That's about all there was to look forward to, wasn't it?
Trouble is, Andrew's got so many stories which we can't repeat.
Sorry, what did you say?
We can't repeat a lot of stories. There was a very kind lady who lived at Ivy Cottage, which is the house on the left-hand side, and her name was Muriel Foster. She was really well known in the village at the time as a naturalist.
She was great.
Yeah,
She did the lovely book in the Heritage Centre.
Yeah.
On the fish, drawing the fish.
Yeah, first lady of fishing. She was a salmon fisher and fisher person.
And she was the sort of, if you had an animal, if you found a bird or something that needed help, you'd take it to her and she'd see to it.
We all called her Aunt Muriel, and she taught me to play Monopoly.
Didn't she give us 3 rides on the fair as well, didn't she?
Sorry?
She dished out 3 rides. to us on
Yes,
the
she did.
fair.
Yes, she did that as well. Anyway, she paid for the first hour for us children to ride on the fairground dodge and the Charabang beat. Remember? Now there was also an artist in the village called Daphne Patterson, and she lived at Half Moon in Castle Street, and she was a very good artist apparently. And that's one of her paintings. Now that painting actually is of the fair when it came to Albourne, but this was Edward's fair. Now Edwards always had their dodgems in the square in front of where the Chinese takeaway is now. Always had it there. And Scarrett's, the opposition, had it by the blacksmith. And Muriel Foster paid for us to ride on Scarrett's dodgems.
Yeah.
Not Edwards, Scarrett's.
Scarrett's. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now then.
Oh. You can say about that.
Okay. Oliver Hawkins was secretary and organizer of the carnival for years. That's Andrea's grandfather, who we saw just now.
With the donkey.
With a donkey. This is a 1951 carnival program, and there's the actual inside of the carnival program for 1951. But look at it, what it says at the top: the centuries-old Albourne Carnival. How old was Albourne Carnival? Well, we know it's about 112 years old now, I think, a bit more. But then they thought it was a lot older.
Yeah, well, I can remember 1956.
Getting ahead of
That was
yourself.
very important, to me.
Well, you'll see.
Grandpa,
There's Oliver again.
There he is again, bless him. He was such a good man, my granddad. He'd do anything for everybody, and he'd been a really wonderful granddad to me, and I loved him dearly. And he said, I was only 15 then, and I think when you were 15, you could go in for Carnival Queen. He said, I would dearly love you to go in for Carnival Queen. But those days, you didn't have to be judged. So I would never have done that. I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it anyway. But I thought, well, he's been so good to me. However much I did it, I would do it for him. And I'm glad I did, because
You had to sell tickets.
oh yeah, we had to sell tickets. You cycled everywhere to sell these tickets. I don't know what these tickets were, but at the end of it, they were counted up, and if you had the most, you were the Carnival Queen. Well, the 2 girls that were with me, we all friends. Well, I sold the most tickets, and so I was Carnival Queen. So
You would have been anyway.
no, I would never have done that. And luckily, apparently Albourne Band and Brownsbury Band took it in turns to follow the Carnival Queen's float. And it was Brownsbury Band. And by the time I'd had the nerve to start looking around, I was looking at Brownsbury Band and I thought, that's a nice looking tall chap at the back of Mountain Back. He was tall and he was playing a cornet, and I thought, oh, he's nice, as you do. And I thought, gosh, he's lovely. Anyway, we did look at each other a few times going round. Then after the carnival's over, you didn't have the fair. You had a dance in the hall. And who should turn up at the dance but this Superman? And we had lots of dances together. Anyway, on one of these girls on the float with me, she worked at the same place as Pete did. So Pete saw her, and we got to know each other's names by then. And he saw her on a Monday, and he said, please, could you try and get a date with Andrea? Please. So she came to me on the Monday, fixed a date with Pete to come to me on the Tuesday. But he didn't know where I lived. So I had to stand at the bottom of Farm Lane, and I knew he was coming from Ramsbury. And then he cycled towards me, didn't he? He only had a bike, and that's all you had in those days. And he didn't know where I lived or anything, so I took him home. And we sat there. There was nobody actually at home. They'd gone out somewhere. So we sat and chatted and got to know one another really well. And
That's another name for it.
and no, seriously,
I think we've got to stop here.
seriously, that was the beginning of a very long love affair, which still carries on today.
Result over there.
But I still had another year to go at school, so that made school even more miserable. But I know at White House we had you knew him too, didn't you?
Yeah.
He was a history teacher, I think, Mr. Adcock.
Adcock, yeah.
He was quite a nice teacher, really. And I had a phone call one night. He called me down and he said, Andrew, there's a phone call from your dad. And I thought, oh God, no. It was Pete. He'd phoned up to speak to me and said he was my dad. And I think he did that twice. And I thought, we should get had up. We should get told off. But nothing happened about it. I didn't get told off or anything. So anyway, I had to wait till I left school before we could see each other.
Love prevailed.
And then he played football. I learned to score at cricket. I went with the band everywhere, but we did see each other. That was that.
Then he went in the army.
Moving on. Sorry. Can I just go back to this is Carnival was really important, of course, and pony entries. We think this was after the Olympics, don't we?
Yeah, that was us. That was me.
Yeah.
Being a power.
The right hand one on here. Sorry, the left hand one on here is Andrea.
And that was Philippa Shee, Mrs. Shee's daughter.
And Mrs. Shee's daughter from the All Arts and Crafts. Yeah. Philippa.
Sorry.
Philippa was it?
Philippa.
Philippa Shee. Yeah. And pony entries are always popular, and it's only recently really that I don't know, they're not allowed anymore. One thing that we didn't have at Carnival, that Andrea has said, there was no fair. The fair didn't come to Carnival until late 70s. Around then. But they had a Carnival dance at the end of the Carnival on a Saturday. Here's a cheeky little chappie next year to the Carnival programs. But I put this in. Do you recognise him? Yeah. I always put this one in. But why I put it in is to make up the room of the shot on the screen. I really wanted to put it on the left-hand side. It tells you how the Old Carnival Queen was selected. Now they had to sell, and Andrea was telling me this, they had to sell tickets. And on this particular one, the Carnival Queen, who's actually kneeling down and being crowned, I think I got my elbow in her ear. Anyway, she actually sold 900 tickets. And how much were they each?
6p each.
6p.
6 old p.
I-
20 the pound.
I
worth.
walked, I knocked on every door in this village.
40
I
pounds.
cycled to Ramsbury and knocked on every door in Ramsbury. I walked to Baden and cycled back down.
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it today. It wouldn't be safe really.
You
would
wouldn't be
it?
allowed to do it
No,
today,
you wouldn't be
no,
allowed to
no.
do it.
No.
But
But you'll see here 900
I
tickets. That's-
sold 42 quid.
if you work it out, I couldn't work it out. And so you can see how many, and there was more people than it shows on there, but they raised quite a lot of money. And I can't remember what Carnival was, what was they raised money for? I think it was a sports field. It was a sports
I
field.
can't remember, Terry.
Yeah.
Before that, it was before the war, certainly they were raising money for Sadler's Hospital. There's some of the village girls there, and I recognise a good lot of them. Remember Harry Shepherd, who died not too long ago? Lady on the which way you look, on the left-hand side at the front, that's Maura, that's Harry's wife, became Harry's wife. Yeah.
Tanner.
Yeah, Pat Tanner, the one with the hat in the middle, with the bowler hat in the middle. She lived at Marge. She was your cousin.
She was, yeah,
must have been. Step cousin.
step cousin.
Yeah. All related in this village.
Very complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. There's Andrea then. Now then, just this shows you in 1953, before the sewage was put in. And you'll see the house on the left, it was actually butchers. The house, the right-hand side of it was actually a private owned, wasn't owned, it was rented, but it was a house for some living. And opposite there, you'll see a shop, which Warwick and, were you there, Warwick? Yeah. And Barry Hood live now. It was Stacey's in those days, and they were a general grocer and bakers.
And sweets. They after the war, you couldn't get sweets, could you? They were rationed.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I think the Stacys
Yeah.
started the
Yeah.
sweets.
Sweets being sold in the village.
Yeah.
We didn't know
In
about
great
sweets.
big jars. Yeah, it's great.
And also, because they're bakers, at Christmas they will cook your goose for you, or I think it was goose then, or cockerel or whatever, but you could have it cooked for you. The right-hand picture will show you after that, after obviously 56, when that building's been taken down. Hard winter then. I've got a feeling it's hard winter of 62, 63 actually, that one. But anyway, it's not long after the picture on the left, but it's completely changed with that house knocked down before the what's now the Chinese takeaway was put up. A couple more shots of the village shops. There's on the left-hand one is the old bell, and I've got a picture of something in a minute, something else. That's looking at West Street and looking from the other end down. The car there was Tommy Lunn's. He ran a chauffeur sort of business where he'd have one car for weddings, and the next day he'd use it for funerals. But in the war, Tommy was in the Home Guard, and I don't know if it was this car, but he cut the back of it down and mounted a Browning machine gun. Don't know whether they ever used it.
Yeah. I can remember this, yeah.
Yeah. Now these three old chaps here, the one in the middle is Barney. He was the landlord of the Bell, the pub on the left there. And here's three old jockeys. Tommy Humphreys on the left, Barney and Joe Bowes, just reminiscing that they were all 80, I think. Yeah, they were 80. Yeah.
I remember the cobblers.
Oh, this one, yeah, you know Castle Street, the bottom of Castle Street?
Yeah.
Lovely old cottage there. Used to be a cobbler's.
And I can remember Billy Palmer, he had terrible teeth, and because he would keep nails, you know, like that. And there, and also here was his cigarette. But he was a very good cobbler,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
used to, people tell you, he would put studs in the boys'
Football
football boots.
Yeah,
wouldn't
we would. Yeah.
But apart from that, there's nothing changed in Castle Street, except for the garage on the right, which is all one source. That's the old fish and chip shop. The fresh
Fruit and veg.
fish, fruit and veg, and the fish and chip shop is actually just out of focus there. That was the shop there. That became Framers as well. Afterwards. Johnny Morris, really well known in the village in the 40s and 50s. He first came in probably in his 20s as a farm manager for Bomford. Jimmy Bomford had he was
It's a long lanes.
city man, and he had his farm along lanes, didn't
Long lanes.
he? Yeah. And Johnny was his manager. Neither of them knew a bit about farming, did they? They didn't know farming at all. But they had Jimmy Bomford had money, and I don't know how Johnny first. It's through Bomford's connection that he first got on the radio as the Hot Chestnut Man. But Johnny Morris, can anyone remember him as a Hot Chestnut Man?
Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you. Because he would tell us village lads stories, funny stories, outside his home, which is at Pond House. And you can see on the right-hand side, he'd wheel a chestnut thing around.
And he used to sing. My mum used to play the piano for him.
Yes, she did, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He used to sing at concerts.
Yeah, that was well before it became known as, what did it become known as? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Animal Magic. That was long before then. Remember Cliff Mitchellmore? He used to come to see him quite a bit. And there he is in the Home Guard, actually. I'm sorry, this is in the 40s now, but you'll see in the Home Guard, in the middle row on the right-hand side, second in, is Johnny Morris. He was in our Home Guard. Just to sort of put a bit of perspective on it, he was into Auburn. He was on the parish council.
Was he?
Yep. Yeah, weren't you on it at the same time? No. I bet Oliver was, though. Oliver was.
A bit later.
The one in the middle at the bottom is Brown's. Brown. He had the shop in West Street, which was the fruit and veg shop, and he did the first fish and chips, didn't he?
Yeah.
But that cup in the front was they won that. That was the marching squad. We had over 100 men in the Home Guard. I'm sorry, I'm going back a bit further than I really want to, but we had over 100 men in the Home Guard, and this was their display marching team. And they won that cup in Marlborough the day before D-Day. No one knew it was going to be D-Day. And so they all went to Marlborough, and all the other Home Guard units had their display squads, and we won it. And we've got it in the Heritage Centre now. Yeah,
Grandpa was in the Home Guard.
yes, it was. We've got a picture of all
He's
of them.
no taller than me, and his
Oliver, yeah.
jacket. He did something really kind one night. He was along the Swindon Road, sorry,
Yeah,
along the
okay.
Swindon Road, and somebody came towards him in the dark, and it as somebody had got off the train, and he was not used to the country, so he wanted to get to London, and he was absolutely terrified of the stillness of everything. And Grandpa walked with him miles to get him through. He was so frightened of being out in the countryside. Yeah.
Andrew's grandfather, Oliver, he was only about 4'11". He
yeah.
really was a small chap, but he packed a punch. You didn't mess with Oliver, and he's such a nice person. He was the bee's knees in the village, and you wouldn't have known it. He
was a Christian.
He was
He
a
was a
Christian,
real Christian.
and he was on the Wiltshire County Council, and he did all sorts of good things, didn't he? Barnes Coaches. Now that was their first new one on the left, and that's Cyril Barrett. Do you remember Cyril? Yes, of course you do.
That's another my dad's
Another uncle. I put the one on the right in there only to show you what it was actually like then. That is a snapshot from above, what it was like when that left-hand one was taken, more or less. But where the coaches are on that right-hand picture, that used to be a coal yard, and because they delivered coal. They had a big business, didn't they? Coal business. But in the 80s, I think it was, they stopped doing it and went just into coaches. Anyone who lives in Barnes Yard now? Yes, you do, don't you? Do you get water in the kitchen? That's all right then. Oh, I won't go into that then.
Blame Nanny from.
Okay. The racing stables were at the height of their success in the early 50s. They really were one of the top stables in the country. And although they were only small, they only had about 3 dozen boxes, loose boxes. They were always winning the top races. They never won the Grand National or the Derby. Well, the Grand National, they only trained horses to go over the jumps. They didn't have many horses that just ran flats. I'll tell you something about that. Go on.
They stopped because of doping.
Yeah.
Mrs.
They were really literally the top of the tree. They rivaled Lambourne, and they had some very successful jockeys there. Gordon Richards was the most famous one. He was their main jockey. And as Andrea was saying, in 1956, you'll know the story, I'm sure. I'm going to tell it to you again. Just go like that. They had a problem with doping. Because they were one of the top stables, it was just open for doping. And this one time, one of the apprentices there rode a horse which was quite fancy, but actually didn't come out. It came last. And he said to the trainer, Bay Powell, look, I'm sorry, Gov, there's something wrong with this horse. We'll have it checked. So they did, and they found it had been doping. And who was that? Who was that jockey? Who was that apprentice? Lester Piggott.
Oh.
Yes, he was an apprentice here. But we also had a couple of champion jockeys. One was Jack Dowdeswell, who went to Lambourne, and his family still lived there. And he gave me a picture of him, his son, Nick Dowdeswell, gave me a picture of his dad with Lester Piggott riding over the jumps. Now, Lester was actually a flat jockey. He started over the jumps, but he fell off so many times, he said, I had enough of this. And went on the flat. So anyway, that was that.
But you know who did the doping there? Mrs. Powell. Yeah, that's proved.
There were lots of rumours about who did it, but there was a ring of bookmakers based at Compton near Newbury, and they went to prison for it. And there was stable lads at various stables around the country, actually. There's a huge ring doping. And Gordon Richards' stable, who had a stable at Ogbourne then, Andrew, he was implicated but got off. But our trainer, Bay Powell, he just couldn't take it, and he got out of it altogether. He was exonerated, but he got out of it, didn't he? And this is one of the last pictures of the stable lads. This was given to me by Ethel Underwood, whose sister worked for the stable for many years. And so many things and events come to hand.
Yeah, I've got something else to say.
Yes, here we are.
I had 1 year left at school, as I said, so I only saw Pete weekends. But then when I left school, and we had a whole year together, we knew he had to go and do his national service. But it had been deferred because he was doing an apprenticeship. So that summer, he taught me, because I was having to get lifts to Marlborough and always having to wait at the town for these two people to finish work to bring me home. He taught me to ride a motorbike, which he just bought, so that I could have it when he went in the army. And he taught me to ride it, and I passed my test on a motorbike. And it's one thing I wish I could still do. I loved it.
Ride a motorbike?
Yeah.
Did you see that, Sarah?
I rode that every day to work, to Marlborough. And whatever the weather, no nanny business like don't go out because it's going to snow. If I didn't go to work, I didn't get paid. So I rode that in snow, ice, pouring rain, wind, fog, and I loved it.
Yeah, of course you did.
Yeah.
Of course you did. It's beats, wasn't it?
And then, of course, Pete had to go.
So just a few things we haven't mentioned much this evening, if any at all. And I'm really sorry about this, but we just couldn't get much more in it in the
Have I
time.
talked too much?
You? No, it's me who's been talking too much. Everyone gets fed up with me talking. We never hear you talk. The Silver Band, of course, it was called Auburn Silver Prize Band in those days, wasn't it? I
It's
think.
good. Yeah.
And of course, they're always called Westminster. Joe Alder was a conductor in those days, I
Yeah.
remember, and they practiced and rehearsed it in the church room, which is just
Yeah.
up Morble Road on the right. Well,
We used to sit on each other's laps.
yeah, almost, yeah. The children, they had a youth club. Nothing's new, youth clubs were always around, but they called it juniors or seniors. So they had juniors up to 12 and seniors up to 18, I think. And there's two ladies who operated, Mrs. Wootton and Mrs. Barnes, in the West Street Chapel. Tennis was always popular, of course. Courts were hallowed ground. We were not allowed on the tennis courts. Not until we were about 15, I think. The church choir was always the church choir was very popular, and children, of course, the Church of England school, so the vicar actually did quite a bit with the school, and so he was able to encourage children to go into them. And oh yeah, the policeman, didn't we? Of course,
Yeah, but
Mr. Wade.
yeah, I just about remember him.
Yeah,
He
Mr.
was a
Wade.
big, yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
He
Gasher.
frightened me
yeah,
still.
yeah. What was it?
Gasher, my dad was posted from Swindon
His dad was a policeman
Oh,
as
he
well.
was
to
horrible too.
Ramsbury just after the war.
Okay.
And he had a section covering Ramsbury, Froxfield, Chiltern Foley and Albourne. And he had a constable in each of those villages and another one with him in Albourne, sorry, in Ramsbury. So he had quite an experience there. And Gasher Wade was a great big ex-military man,
Yeah.
and he drove a little Austin 7. He used to take up both seats, he did at the same time.
Thanks, Pete. Now then, you'll have to indulge me with this, I'm afraid. When we were young, Harry Shepherd had a farm in going up out of the village at Morble Road.
John Hills.
John Hills, what he bought it from in the end. And Harry, his father had one of the farms in the village. They milked cows and that. Us young lads were, we always went up there and we all learned how to muck out pigs. So what I don't know about mucking out pigs is not worth knowing. I can tell you that now. But Harry had this milling machine, which he built from scratch to mill corn and whatnot for his pigs. He was the pig man. His father did the cows, Harry did the pigs. But it was quite a sort of monstrosity, massive machine. And it was something like that, I think. But I wrote Harry a poem when I was about 13 or 14, I can't remember. But it's this: if at first you don't succeed, please indulge me. If at first you don't succeed, try again. This old proverb, remember I was only about 12 or 13, so it's a bit of the time. This old proverb has been going around in my head. This is the very last thing, by the way. We're finished after this, so you can go now if you want. Driving me insane. But did you know how this saying came about? Well, I'll tell you, although there is some doubt about its authenticity, but in its simplicity and avoiding duplicity, I'll begin when I was a lad. Saturdays, I worked for Harry Shepherd and his dad, mucking out the cows and the pigs on their farm. My mother said, up there, you'll come to no harm. Now, Harry had built a milling machine to mix feed for his pigs. It had to be seen. One day, he called over his father, Fred, to help with a problem he had in the shed. My machine will mix the corn, and my pigs will have no feed for the morn. Right, said Fred, who lit up his pipe and scratched his head. If you want to use corn the machine can draw in, you must stop using the damp stuff in the bin. So the machine, we're nearly there. So the machine worked perfectly for quite a long time until one day it started churning out slime. Again, Harry called over his father Fred, who looked him in the eye and said, my boy, I've told you before, but I'll tell you again. If at first you don't succeed, try drier grain. Everybody. Sorry about that.
I couldn't resist it. We will now draw the raffle, I think. Gavin, have we got are you ready for the raffle? Hang on. Oh, any questions? You won't want any questions. Oh, yes. Wife. Wilf and Peggy, husband and wife, they lived next to you across the road. They had 3 sons. John, who played in the band, and he marched on the carnival one day and died the next day.
Ricky
Then there's Ricky,
and Chris.
who also was in the band, and he died young. And then there's Chris, who was my best man actually. We were the same age, and he's still around. Chris, he became a professional singer, yeah, a country singer. Yeah.
And she was a junior nanny to the Finnsons.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Pete and Andrea know much more than me about the village.
I don't think so.
Any questions anyway? I'd be pleased to try and cope with them. I'll pass them over to Andrea.
No.
But when you got married, did you come to live in, did Peter come to live in the village, or did you go somewhere else?
Did I what, sorry?
Oh, no,
Did you move away from the village when you got married? Or
No.
did Pete come here to live in this village?
Yeah,
we spent
He
the
came
first-
to live here.
We spent the first, we got married while I was doing my national service. I came home on a Friday night, we got married on a Saturday, had a week in Torquay, and I went back in the army and we lived Andrew mum, lived with her mum and dad
Yeah.
and that. And then when I came out, Eric had already said to me, why didn't I join a decent band? And so I left Ramsbury Band and joined Auburn.
Where did you do your national service?
I applied for the REME because I did an engineering apprenticeship, and they,
sorry.
for some reason, put me in the Green Jackets, the infantry, and I did my training with the infantry, and then they transferred me to REME, and I spent my time on a central ordnance depot in Shropshire.
Sarah
Donington.
hadn't gone, so she must have thought.
So it's 130 miles from Auburn to Shropshire. I used to leave home on a Sunday night and get in my bed at 8:30.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for bearing with us. It's just a glimpse of what we went through. We had a good time in the 50s, by and large, except for Andrew's time at the grammar school, which was very unfortunate. She wouldn't want to live that through again. I certainly had a really good time. And I've made friends who I've remained friends with since, which is always a good thing. I bet you did, didn't you? Didn't you make friends and you're still friends with people?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, not.
Oh, you did, okay.
Only one.
Okay, so can we draw the raffle, please? Thank you, Gavin. Who would like to?